So they downgraded the credit on the United States of America. If that doesn't wake you up to what's going on in this country, I don't know what will. It's a major issue. And today on the Steve Beeman Show, we're going to unpack this and see what it means to you, the future, and what it's going to do to your retirement plans if you have any already. So stay tuned for this episode of the Steve Beeman Show. So what in the world is going on? I mean, they just downgraded, this has happened before, but they downgraded the credit rating of the United States. Well, why did Moody's do this? I mean, what's going on? We've talked about it a lot, but you know our nation has $36 trillion in debt. That's a lot of debt. I mean, that's equivalent to about $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. There's no end in sight for it. We're running $2 trillion deficits, $1 trillion trade deficit. I don't see that there's any way, frankly, that we fix this. Now, and we're going to talk about that because I know a lot of you people are anti-Trump and some of you are pro-Trump. And that's fine. I'm kind of neither anti or pro. It's a policy question. And when you look and say, well, what in the heck's going on that they would downgrade our economy or our credit rating? The problem is we don't have good solutions in place. And the bet that's being made by the credit agencies is that given the nature of our government in general, not just Trump, but the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the politicians who run this place, they're thinking we won't be able to fix it. So for 10, 15 years now, I've been talking about this debt and the fact that debt must be settled. You either have to pay it off, you have to refinance it, or you got to go bankrupt on it. Something's got to give. We're just carrying more and more debt. We're putting it on the millennials and the Gen Zs. It's not fair. It's not right, but it's happening. In addition, we're creating a culture of people who want now and want to pay later. I mean, the government is leading by example here, and I'll give you some numbers later in the show on what's gone on in just consumer debt. It's unbelievable. I mean, we can't borrow our way to prosperity. And so I hear people talk and they're down on Doge and they're down on what's going on. But let's start with a blank sheet of paper and say, how would you and I fix this problem? Honest to God, you have 36 trillion in debt. You've got an economy that for the last 15 years has been built on debt, not on productive growth, but debt. And you got a deficit that's running 2 trillion because what's the structure of that? We bring in about 5 trillion, we're spending 7. Okay? Of the 5 trillion we bring in, like 3 trillion of it is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Another trillion's interest on the debt. I mean, there's not a lot to go around here. So everything we spend, we're borrowing. And it's just not going to work. So the problem you've got, if you and I work together and say, how are we going to fix this? And you say, some are going to say, raise taxes. Some are going to say, cut taxes. All right, so let's consider them. If you raise taxes, just like raising a penalty on anything, you get less of it. And again, this is the billionaires and millionaires crap I hear out of the left all the time. And we've got politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders who are selling you out. And you need to know that. And I know some of you are going to get mad at that and go, the billionaires didn't earn it and all this crap. Billionaires are not the problem. And again, I'll give you a specific example. In the early 90s, and most of you weren't around then, but I was. In the early 90s, the Clinton administration then came out with the same mantra. Billionaires and millionaires are the problem. All their big fancy yachts are causing the problem. So they put a big tax on yachts. And they thought, well, that'll help solve the budget deficit. It'll help equalize things. It'll make things all better. Well, what happened within 1 year? Yacht sales collapsed. A whole lot of people lost their jobs. And guess what? When you penalized it by raising taxes, less people bought yachts. And that's the fallacy you have of this tax to millionaires and billionaires. When a billionaire has money, and you could say it's 100 billionaire, first of all, that's not cash. That's in illiquid stock usually, but let's assume it's in cash. The 100 billionaire is going to buy jets, boats, real estate. They're going to make investments. They're doing things that are productive to the economy. Look, I've started companies left, right. I've had success. I've had failure. I've done all of this stuff, and we've talked about it. And we'll talk more. But here's the reality. I never got capital to start a company from a poor person. I go to the wealthy people and I say, I need angel investors. It's the wealth they have that creates the ability of an angel investor to take the risk to start a new company. So part of that wealthy billionaire's money is going to help start new companies and bring other people up to that status. Secondly, they go out and buy yachts and they buy boats and they buy real estate, all of which create jobs, productive jobs that are additive to the economy. Well, what does it do if you tax them? The money gets sent to Washington where the politicians squander it. They strip it off for the bureaucracy and they waste it. It doesn't create anything. It's just gone. Poof, evaporates. Money you send to government that's taken from the productive society does not add to the economy. And I know there's something called the New School of Economics, which will say it's the velocity of money that matters. And you can tax all you want because at the end of the day, it's how fast that money cycles through. That's not necessarily true. It does have to do with productivity as well. Is that money creating something that's greater than the sum of its parts? Again, use the yacht example. A yacht's made up of fiberglass and electronics and motors and all kinds of other things that trickle down, right? That's creative. It adds to the economy. It adds to productivity because you've created something of value out of disparate parts where 1 + 1 = 3. That's what goes on in the private sector. In the public sector, 1 + 1 = 1.5. And that's just the nature of it. I'm not criticizing government. I'm not saying government's bad. I'm just telling you a fact that when you put money into the government, that money declines in value. When you invest it through the private economy, it grows in value. So I go back to this comment. The billionaires, are they the bad guys? Do we just want to tax them to grow our way out of this problem? It won't work. First, there aren't enough of them. I gave you statistics in a prior podcast that if you tax all of the billionaires, there's not enough to cover this. The money exists in the middle, and that's why they keep raising your taxes. They all come out and say, we're not going to raise taxes on below 400,000. Bullshit. Gas taxes, real estate taxes, sales taxes, use taxes, toll taxes, you name the tax. They're coming at you. We already have a progressive tax system. They're already taking 39% of the rich people's money. They can't get enough, so they're coming at you. And it's not about that. It's what do you get for it? When have you ever known government to create something of greater wealth? Yes, we need to have roads. I get it. And roads are additive to the economy, by the way. That's a good thing. But is government the way to do it? Has government ever been the efficient solution to anything? The answer is no, because they're not playing with their own money. They're playing with your money and they don't care about it. And if you don't believe that now, you haven't watched the news. They come out and say it in so many words. Look at all the junk that's been found in the last 3 months. And again, you can all tell me how bad Doge is and how this is really a criminal effort and Elon Musk is a criminal. Malarkey. Doge went in and found specific waste, fraud, and abuse, totaling now $360 billion or some such thing. And we talk about waste, it's what they spend the money on. All these cultural programs, these education programs in foreign countries, there's all kinds of this junk. And you've seen the list. I'm not going to go through it, but you've seen the list of where they've wasted the money. And fraud, everybody agrees Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid are filled with fraud. It's not just people over 120 years old. It's people who don't even belong on the tax or on the rolls. We're seeing it time and time again. The only naivete I can say that any of you hold is if you believe these politicians have your interest at heart. They don't. They never have. No politician going to Washington has ever really wanted to serve you. Now, I will say, and you hate me for this, but I think Trump is different. I think he's doing it for himself. I think he's got a massive ego. But I also think he's doing it for the middle class. He's looking at an America that said, we've squandered our wealth, we've transferred our wealth to other countries, we've borrowed ourselves into oblivion, we've created an entitlement society. How in the world do we fix it without having a total, complete collapse? Very few people know an answer to that. I'm not saying Trump's right. But if you're sitting there and you're on the left, especially, or the right, I mean, I think either one, and you're saying we can just hold the same steady course. Well, this shot from Moody's to lower our credit rating ought to be a shot across the bow for you. We can't. We can't keep borrowing our way into success. It doesn't work. We have to build a real fundamental economy. So what are we trying to do? If you said to me Kamala could get elected, or even go back to the Bush-McCain Republicans, either of those, they're going to say, keep doing more, tweak it, raise a little tax here, cut the growth in spending here. They never cut the budget, by the way. They cut the growth in the budget. So if they say they cut budgets, that's a lot of crap. Anyway, so you get those kind of at the margin changes. But what's it gotten us? All this infrastructure spending on the part of government just gets wasted. It doesn't go anywhere. Again, I'm not criticizing people who work for the government. I think most of them try to do a good job. I know there's waste and abuse in some of it, but most probably do. And I think that's laudable. However, it's not their money, so they're not as careful with it as you are. When you go out and buy something, you look for the most value for your money, the lowest price for the highest quality. When government goes out, it either looks just for the lowest price and doesn't care about the quality, or it goes out to a no bid situation where it's going to get a hugely high price and without the quality to back up the price. We've all heard about $500 toilet seats. Now, that's an anomaly, but the fact of the matter is government doesn't spend their money. They spend yours, and they don't care about it. And that's why in today's world, we've borrowed $36 trillion. Now, all of that's not what I'm going to call real debt. And this is maybe something that gets hyped up in the press. And then it depends which side of the political spectrum you want to hear. But of the 36 trillion, about 9 trillion of it is owed to other countries. The rest of it's owed to ourselves. And what I mean by that, when Social Security, for example, brings money in, and this we did a thing on whether it was a Ponzi scheme. It's not. It's a transfer program. We're taking money from young people and giving it to old people. When that money goes into the Social Security pot, it doesn't stay there. It doesn't get invested. What happens is the government comes in, takes it out, and they put in an IOU. And then they go spend that cash on other programs. So that's a lot of the debt. They owe Social Security a huge pot of money. Now, you could say, is that real debt? It's kind of we owe ourselves. Well, on the books, it's real debt. Does it have to get repaid? Well, it does if you want to keep Social Security going. But that's an issue you and I can talk about forever. How do you make that program not blow up? Again, it's typical of a government program. They started something with a complete lie. They told you that Social Security was an insurance program. They called it old age survivors insurance. The idea was that you put a little bit of money away from it's forced retirement. You put a little bit of money away, we'll save it for you, and at the end of the day, we'll give it back plus interest. What really happened? Well, they spent the money as it came in, and it ended up becoming a transfer payment. There were 5 workers per retiree when it started. Now there's about 1.8. So if you're young and you're in your 20s or 30s and you're feeling hopeless about Social Security, you should. There's 2 of you paying for every retiree now. So is there enough money there for these retirees? No. And that bubble's just coming to the top now. So I go back to what starts this, the downgrade. They downgraded our credit rating because Moody's, like anybody with a brain, says there's no real way out of this mess. Interest rates are going to have to go up because our debt's going to become more risky. As these things get then refunded and rewritten, so when debt comes due, you don't pay it off, you reborrow it, right? So what happens is the government's reborrowing money at the then higher interest rates. So our interest payments go up. So we have to borrow more. Well, that causes interest rates to go up more. If you ever watched a show like Chernobyl, fascinating show about a nuclear explosion that happened that never should have happened. But it happened because mistakes were made by designers and by operators, that a series of events happened that led to this inevitable outcome. Well, what we're doing to our economy is no different. We have policy problems and we have like structural problems. The more we borrow and we refinance at higher interest rates, the more we have to borrow. It's a deadly cycle. And I think you know it. I do. I think most Americans feel it. And I be honest with you, I think that's why Trump got elected. I think most Americans now, at least a slight majority, are feeling like this government screwed us. And they have. Do you really think AOC and Bernie Sanders are out for your interest? Bernie's a multimillionaire. He doesn't give a crap about the little guy. He just wants you to give him money so that he can fly around in his private jet. AOC, she's never done a thing in her life. She doesn't understand economics. She doesn't understand anything except espousing these millionaires and billionaires and oligarchs to go out and gin up the population. They want to create an envy economy that separates us into disparate groups, and it won't work. Never has. Again, I urge you to study your history and realize what happened in Cuba, the Soviet Union, all of these socialist utopian countries. The AOCs and Bernies of the world came out and said, just tax the rich guy. They're the bad guy. They're the evil guy. When in fact, it's the government itself that's evil. Government is not to be trusted by you. They're not. It's the old, the farmers thing, the scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. No, they're not. They're there to sustain their job. And I'm not disparaging the will and the intent of most government employees. I think most of them are there for good reason. But at the margin, and the elected class especially, they're not there to serve you. They're there to get reelected. So how do they get reelected? They get their face in the media all the time, and they gin up a population so they get freebies. They get gifts. Again, many of you are fans of Charlie Kirk and Turning Point. I've known Charlie a long time, and I think what they're doing is waking up people to the lack of a value proposition in our universities, and that's fine. But here's the point. Charlie gets a base, and he riles them up. He's very good at it, and I credit him with that. They send a lot of money to Turning Point. So what's Charlie's real job? His job as head of it is to get in the media all the time and keep that going. Now, it's the people at the university levels who are trying to make a change. I would argue the politicians are a little bit worse. If you think about removal from the money, I gave a speech many, many years ago, and I was talking about integrity in money. If you go down to the plumber or the electrician, it's the highest level of integrity. You hire them, they come to your house, they're going to do the job that you expect and come to a payment with you, or their reputation gets shot. If you raise that up to a manufacturing company, that's another level of integrity. They have customers who are relying on them to deliver a certain product for a certain price. Go up another level, you have accountants. Now, they're a little bit removed. They're not dealing with their money. They're dealing with the company's money. But it's a highly sensitive relationship. Go up another level to lawyers, and each level you go up has a little less integrity. Lawyers earn money talking. They take a look at the laws and the Constitution, they spin them into ways that meet their needs, and then they go about their business. Win, lose, or draw, they get paid. It's not like they lose if you lose. If you've been in lawsuits, you know that's true. They get paid no matter what. So there's little integrity there. The politicians, the worst. There's no integrity because they get paid to talk. That's all they get paid to do. If they can get you upset enough, then at the end of the day, they get reelected. And that envy economy they talk about and continuing the policies we have by giving you more and more, go listen to them. Reelect me and I'll give you. Back in 2000 and I think it was 10 when the Tea Party came around, I had a friend of mine running for Congress. and he's on the Republican Tea Party side. And he had an opponent who was a left-wing progressive, ex-military, decent human being. But here was the basic argument made to the audience. When he spoke, he said, elect me. I'm going to cut your benefits. I'm going to cut government spending. I'm going to eliminate this debt. I'm going to try to give you your money back and reduce your taxes so you can spend it. The person on the left said, I'm going to raise your benefits. I'm going to raise everything we send you, and I'm going to raise taxes on other people. Well, who do you think got elected? People are rational. They make their own decisions. They whip up these things like education. We have to educate the children. How do you do that? You spend more money. Well, Chicago spends more money than any city in the country on education. Our kids can't read. It's not money. It's operational efficiency. It's operational politicization of the system, because politics don't care about money. They just want more of it. When was the last time you heard a politician say, this program just didn't work? They don't. This program didn't work because it didn't have enough money. Send us more money and the program will work. I mean, my Lord, down at the southern border, how often did we hear the Biden administration say, we need more money, we need more money? We didn't need more money. We just needed effective leadership. Now, again, you could argue and say, well, I don't like that, the way this is done. That's fine, but at least it's being done. And again, I go back. You can be a pro-Trump, anti-Trump. I don't care. But I want you to look with a blank sheet of paper. And how do you respond to Moody's? How do you respond when they say, we're going to cut your credit rating? We're going to force your interest rates up because we don't think you're good for your debt. The way you've run your country the last 40 years is not akin to a good economic circumstance. So here's what Trump did. He said, I'm going to upset the apple cart. Big time. I'm going to eliminate our trade problems first. That $1 trillion in trade deficit, I'm going to do away with it. And I'm going to do it by creating a hiccup in the whole thing. I'm going to throw tariffs out at everybody. I'm going to basically stop global trade until we can renegotiate with every one of these countries on a non-destructive trade arrangement. Go back. This stuff's been going on since Reagan did the free trade in the 80s. And I'm a big Reagan fan, right? But when he said we're going to have free trade, the U.S. dropped its barriers. Everybody else kept theirs in play. We can't keep transferring our middle-class steelworker jobs to everywhere else. Now, I know the arguments, well, we're not going to have steelworkers, we're going to have robots. And I get that. I'm a big fan of this, what I've called the 10-10-10 economy. I think it's all coming. But in the interim, we've got to do something to repatriate those jobs back here. And I think what Trump did, you could say it's stupid, you could say it's brilliant. I don't know, but I don't know what else you do. I really don't. I don't know another solution to that. You can't argue in good faith with the Chinese. They don't argue that way. You put a penalty on them and say, listen, we're going to stop this unless you come to the table. Now, will these tariffs work out like he says? I don't know. I hope so. I think it's a potential solution to the trade deficit problem and to rebuilding the middle class in America. Now, the second component he's doing, and I think this is brilliant, is trying to get foreign capital invested in the U.S. How many times have you listened to a Washington politician, and Biden's the most recent, so I use his name, but you go back to any of them, they're going to use government money to stimulate the economy. So what they're doing is saying, I'm going to either borrow it or I'm going to take money from this group and I'm going to give it to this group. That's not genuinely stimulative. It's just transfer. What Trump did is say, we're going to the outside world and we're going to repatriate their capital to the U.S. We're going to bring in fresh capital. Now, I think his number's up to 8 to 10 trillion. Again, I don't know that that's going to work. I don't know that that money will actually get here, but it's a try. It's an effort. What's the benefit of that new money? To grow our GDP from organic, real productive growth. So we don't have to keep borrowing money to live our lifestyle. This is real stuff. And again, you can hate Trump all you want, but I challenge you to come up with a solution other than that. So on one hand, restructure trade. Secondly, bring in fresh capital to stimulate the private economy to have it grow. Tied to that are tax cuts, right? we got to cut taxes, give people back more of their money. And by the way, for those of you who say, Jeff Bezos doesn't pay enough money, the biggest taxpayers in the world are our billionaires. They're also the most generous people, by the way. They give away more money than anybody else. But if you look at that and say you just want to tax them more, what you're saying is you just want to take from one pot, run it through a filter so it becomes less than that, and then give it out over here. I'm saying let them have it. Let them directly invest it in new businesses, plant, equipment, ideas. Let the people keep their own money. Don't run it through government and have it detracted. And again, you could argue with me and say, no, that's economically not the solution. You need to raise taxes. And I've heard countless times the arguments about, well, tax rates were 70% in the 70s. Yeah, tax rates were high after World War II, but nobody paid those rates. Everything was deductible. So they could say, well, the top tax bracket's 90%. I guarantee you nobody paid 90%. The average take from the government was about 20%. I mean, you can look at that's actually the more interesting statistic than tax rates. Go look at the percent of the economy that's made up of federal, state, and local government. The federal government portion has stayed in the low 20s for a long time. What's interesting is state and local's grown and grown and grown. Total government now is about 40, low 40% of our total economy. We have a free economy. Do you rethink that one real quick? Because they've crept in. It's the frog in the frying pan. We now have a government economy of almost half of our economy. So where's that money coming from? They're stripping it out. They're taking it from the people because government never gave away a dollar. It didn't take from somebody else. So when Moody's cuts our rate, they're saying, okay, you have a trade deficit problem. We're at least putting in plans to try to fix it. You have a growth problem. We're putting in plans to try to fix this. You have a debt problem. Well, the debt problem only gets fixed if we can lower interest rates by growing the economy. That's how that works. And then we refinance it at lower interest rates and we grow the economy so revenues to the government go up. And again, you've heard this time and time again. It started with John Kennedy in the 60s. When he cut taxes, revenues to the government went up. When Reagan cut tax rates, revenues to the government went up because they don't cut taxes, keep in mind, they cut the rate. And when the rates go down, people have more of their money, the economy spins faster. And when the economy spins faster, more productive growth is established. Go back to the yacht example. Instead of government leaving it alone, which had X number of yachts sold per year, they penalized it by putting a tax on it. It dropped that number precipitously. All those people lost their jobs. All those suppliers lost their contracts. All that economy dried up. They transferred the money to government. What'd they do with it? They squandered it. Because that's what government does. It's not their money. It's your money. Now that's got Moody's kind of going, well, there's no way outside of some real reform they're going to fix their economy. I challenge you, come up with better ideas and don't just throw out, well, tax the billionaires. There's not enough money there. You have to grow the economy. And how do you do that? You don't do it through taking more out of the private citizens and giving it to the government. You do it by putting more money into the private sector, bringing in fresh capital, and growing it in a bottom-up way. Hopefully, the next 10 years, we'll see growth out of our productive economy instead of just out of debt. And I've shown those numbers. I've proved the case that since 2010, we have grown based on borrowing. You and I are only living like we live today on borrowed money. And I put up on the Twitter feed a picture today. I want to pull it up for you real quick. This was produced by Yahoo Finance. U.S. household debts now hold $18 trillion in debt. So it's not just the government that's borrowing us into oblivion. It's us. It's we the people. And why are we doing that? Because we argue we can't live the way we want to live without borrowing money. Now, Washington's done a lot of that. We're following their lead. but also use the old expression, Madison Avenue, right? The advertisers. They've persuaded you that real happiness comes from spending your money or money you don't have. And then easy credit through credit card companies, lending companies, and everybody else has people borrowing money to live beyond their means. Unlike the government, you can't just print money, so you're going to have to settle that debt. So when you look at the government's debt of 36 trillion and the consumer debt of 18 trillion, Moody's and others go, well, these guys are in real trouble. And we are. In Europe, they went through austerity programs where they just cut people's wages. And this was because government runs most of their economy. When the government goes into austerity, people lose their lifestyle. Well, in this country, we still have mostly a free economy. So when we talk about austerity, it's all of us. It's all of us not going out to dinner all the time. It's all of us not buying designer clothes and having Starbucks at $5 a coffee. I mean, I grew up in a world before Starbucks where coffee was like 50 cents for an unlimited cup at McDonald's. Now we go to Starbucks where it's $5. And yes, inflation comes out because government spends too much money, so they have to print money. And when they print money, each dollar is worth less. That's basic. I think everybody understands supply and demand of money is no different than supply and demand of anything. You know, it's the old, what's the value of this pen? Well, it depends how many of them there are. If this is the only pen in the world, it's really valuable. If there's a billion of them, it's not that valuable. Dollars are the same way. If there's this amount, it's worth a lot. If there's this amount, it's not worth much. But you're not like the government. You can't just print your own money. You got to borrow it or earn it. And with taxes now taking more and more of your income, it's harder and harder for you to earn it. I mean, I talk to young people all the time. I got a bunch of kids, and I've got grandkids coming up. And I look at them and I worry about them. They're paying so much in taxes on every level that it does make it hard for them to get ahead. And prices have adapted now. I saw a statistic recently on housing prices and how in the mid 80s, you know, it was a house was typically maybe 4 times your income, where today it's like 8 times your income for an average house. Part of that's demographic adjustment. Keep in mind, it was in the 80s, we really migrated to the 2-income household. So you had more money chasing real estate, so prices went up. And that's been talked about. And that's actually one thing I agree with Elizabeth Warren about, although I don't agree with her much on anything. But she talks about how the 2-income thing's a phantom. Because instead of living off one person's income and then banking the other person's, we started living to those 2 people's income. Then when one of them loses their job, there's real trouble to be had. But because of that, prices have gone up on commodities like housing, and we're living beyond our means because we can't afford it anymore. It's going to come to a head. So the way out, the solution is to grow. It's the only way out. Now, we're going to try to grow the federal economy by, again, these basic things. We're going to restructure trade. We're going to bring in fresh capital. We're going to deregulate the economy so there's less cost on business to grow. I mean, I could do a whole podcast on like the unbelievable regulations put on businesses. And I know some of you out there are going to go, well, business is bad. It needs to be regulated. I agree. Some businesses are bad and they need to be regulated. I mean, I lived in the 70s, a time in which, you know, a lot of trash got shoved into our water tables. I get it. There's some regulation that's necessary. But we've gone to a level where it's just costing businesses more and more and more. In Illinois, where I live, if you pay an employee, let's say you want to go out and pay an employee $25 an hour, you have to just about double that for an all-in cost because of taxes, regulatory costs, and everything else. So what's happening is people are hiring less people. The cost of regulation has just put it out of reach. So we have to, again, restructure trade, bring in fresh capital, deregulate, and cut taxes for people so there's more free money flowing in the system. That will grow the economy. That's the only way out of this. And if you have a better idea, I'd love to hear it. I don't have all the answers to all the things in the world. I mean, I know economics. I've been in that world for 30 years. But I also know the experts in economics sometimes are full of it. I mean, I've met a lot of these people, and a lot of them are full of it. Economics, they used to call it the dismal science because it's all philosophy and not math. I mean, you can build models that do great things, and I'll tell you stories about that all day long. But the reality is, when you look at the models, they're oftentimes wrong. Common sense rules economics. Supply and demand is an unfightable law. It exists. So we're trying to grow the economy because you got to. Moody's isn't stupid. They're looking, saying you're in an unsustainable position, but you and I know that. And I go back, if you're 20 years old or you're 30 years old, I welcome you to try to find a solution being told to you by those on the left in the Democratic Party. I'm not saying Republicans are any different, by the way. I think they're both full of it. It's why I like Trump. I don't think he's a Republican or a Democrat. You need a solution that benefits you. And if you ask me politically where I stand, I tell you I'm much more of a libertarian. A pox on both their houses. I don't need the Republicans telling me how to live my social life, and I don't need the Democrats telling me how to live my fiscal life. I just soon handle it myself, thank you very much. And by the way, when we have individual freedom like that, things work. The economy grows. We build moral laws. We build respectable relationships. We don't tear each other apart by fragmenting us into different groups. Again, I've used this phrase, the envy economy. The problem with that is that when the government goes out and creates the envy economy, they're doing it to separate you from your fellow Americans. They're just trying to drive a wedge. That's not going to solve this problem. So until Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Hakeem Jeffries, any of these people, and go to the right, the Mitch McConnell world, and all of that. I don't even know most of their names anymore. Go to that. Tell me the solutions they're proposing. I've not seen it. I've been watching for 50 years. I mean, I remember back in the 80s watching this stuff going, this is not sustainable. We're heading toward a really bad crash. Maybe 50 years from now, 100 years from now, we're going to crash this thing. Well, it looks like we're closer to that now than we were then. And I want to help through it. I want to work with you. I want to give you solutions. I think, the individual is the one who's going to make the difference. That's why I want every one of you to be financially literate. I want you to understand how Wall Street works. It's not that complicated. Most of them are honest people. Wall Street is not the enemy here. Again, that's another separate and conquer. Wall Street versus Main Street. Wall Street's not necessarily opposed to Main Street. The difference is in Wall Street is they care about money. That's their business. Their product out of their factory is money. In the Midwest, to use that euphemism, the factory product is clothing or steel or some hard good. Well, Wall Street's not the enemy. You just have to know how they work and the way they think. What's criminal about it is when Wall Street gets in bed with the government. And that is criminal. AIG. I mean, my gosh. How much did they charge us in their free bailouts because they were too big to fail? All of these structural things came to play in Moody's downgrading us. And that's going to cost you money because interest rates are going to go up. Your lifestyle is going to go down. You have to fix this, and we have to fix it together. We have to create, I don't even want to use this phrase, but a libertarian experience. We need to put extreme freedom into the hands of the people and get it out of the hands of the state houses in Washington. The more these people tell you they can fix your problems, the more they're going to create them because that's how they get paid. And yeah, this is a desperate time because I don't think we have many years left if we don't change the model dramatically. And when you say, well, that sounds very reactionary in itself, that's a very alarmist thing. Okay, you tell me how this plays out. Our debt is growing at 10% a year. Our revenues aren't going up that fast, so we're borrowing more. The more we borrow, the higher interest rates go, and the higher interest rates go, the more it costs us to borrow, so the more we have to borrow. How does that end well? Now, I've had people tell me that, this debt thing, they're going to go to the Dave Ramsey thing. And I like Dave Ramsey. For the vast majority of what he says, I'm dead on agreement with him. I think there are times you can borrow money, but there's smart debt and there's dumb debt. Most of that $18 trillion that Americans have is dumb debt. Debt used to support a lifestyle they can't otherwise afford with no way out. Now, if you're an entrepreneur and you say, well, I have a little company and we want to grow and I want to borrow money to grow it, well, I can understand that's not necessarily dumb debt. It's risky. I can tell you stories after story, personal experience on how risky it is. But if you're willing to accept the consequences and you have a chance to make it grow and an opportunity to see it grow, then debt's not all bad. The problem is in our 18 trillion and in our 36 trillion, it's dumb debt. It's going to have to get paid back. Nobody seems to want to know how. I mean, we've just covered a lot. And I'm looking at this and I look at Washington and I get frustrated because I watch the news and it's not even news anymore. I watch the entertainment news, and that's whether you watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox, whatever, it's entertainment, right? It's not news. But I watch the entertainment news and I respect how different the opinions are. Look at this $400 million plane Qatar wants to give us. If you're over here, it's the greatest thing in the world. It's a freebie. Take it. If you're over here, oh my God, that's corrupt. That's just stupid. Who cares? What you and I care about is our own world, our own lifestyles, our own environment. We care that we're able to live up to our own abilities and our own dreams and aspirations. Washington isn't going to get you there. They don't give a damn about you. And if you believe they are, if you really do, if you think that these politicians have your interest at heart, then God bless you. But you're going to be in for a bad disappointment one day because they don't care about you. And I'm not saying I'm any better. If I was elected to Washington, I'd be the same way. I'd want to get reelected. That's my job, to get reelected. It's that simple. So what am I going to do? I'm going to pick my base. I'm going to throw flames so that I get on the media every night and I'm putting this group against this group. That's how Washington works. But I believe, like Josie Whale did in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that governments don't get along. People do. And I think you and I together as a free people can actually fix the problems if they just get the hell out of the way and quit ruining it for us. Again, think about that number. They're like 42% or 43% of our total economy now, federal, state, and local. That's a problem because you're paying for it. You think your gas is expensive? Hell, half your gas is taxes. You want the American dream of owning a home? That's a fantasy. There's no one in this country that owns their own home. And I'll tell you why. You rent the land from the government. That's what property taxes are. You're renting the land from the government. And by the way, I could go all day on this because that flies in the face of how this country was founded. What was so unique about the United States is the government stayed out of it and people owned the land. I mean, Will Rogers said, buy land, they ain't making it anymore. Well, now, when you buy land, quote unquote, you have to pay the government a rent on it. They've taken the land back, just like the old monarchies of Europe. You rent your land from the government. And we did it because we believed they had our interest at heart. Let's have property taxes to pay for local schools, local this, local that. It's just rent. And because it's not their money, they don't spend it efficiently. They give it away. But, that's a problem we'll all face down the road. But if you're in your 20s and 30s and you're feeling it, you're going, I can't even afford to buy a house. Well, look at the property tax component. That'll give you a big explanation for that. So why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I believe we're at a change in the country, and I believe that we're at a change for my children. If we don't find liberty again and freedom and take responsibility for our own need for freedom, we're not going to get there. So I created the Steve Beeman experience, whatever you want to call this, and I want it to work for you. I want to provide you the tools to know what you're dealing with, the education to know what you're doing, the perspective to know what's going on, and I don't want to do it with a spin that just pits you against somebody else. I don't think we're all that different. Again, I go back to political rallies I've been in where I've stood on one side and there have been fighting between the two. I was at one years ago, and I'm telling you, there was a line. Here were this group and here was this group, and they were yelling back and forth. And I walked across to the line. And I said, could I have a minute, please? A nice person said, sure. I said, let me ask you a question. You're here because you want education for our children, right? Yeah. You want sustainable and good health care for everybody, right? Yeah. Well, what's the difference? That's what we all want. It's not that we want different things. It's how we get there. And you're not going to get there with emotional flame throwing about oligarchs and billionaires. You're going to get there with real help for real people and real solutions for real people. And unfortunate for you, the real solution is you. And that's why you need to be empowered to live your life to your fullest capabilities. I hope that you'll take it to heart. So on today, we've talked about it. Again, I think this is hopefully giving you some understanding of why Moody's downgraded us and what it's going to do to the markets, because this is not going to be a pleasant experience. But as always on the program, I hope that you stay sharp, stay sovereign, and stay free. I'm Steve Beeman, and thanks for watching.